have spent so much money on incarcerating people, especially over the last 30 years with the war on drugs. We have seen not only incarceration rates, but spending rates just go through the roof. Incarceration rates have tripled from 1987 to 2007. The incarceration rates tripled. Here in Ohio, we spend $25,000 per inmate per year, and right now we have about 51,000 inmates. And that's just our statewide prison system. That does not include our jail populations on the local level. So this is really something that, whether it's sort of the human aspect of it that maybe people on the left are more interested in and really gets them involved, or it's just simply the fact that we can no longer continue to spend the kind of money we're spending incarcerating people and continuing to cycle them through the court system. That maybe gets folks on the right more interested. Everybody has come together in one way or another to see that we need to reform criminal justice and then also make reentry a little bit of an easier process for folks.
Reentry is critical not only to a specific community, but it's critical to our entire nation. And I believe that it's critical because it's happening. Many people may not be aware that it's happening, but every day we have individuals going into the criminal justice system, being incarcerated, and inevitably coming home.
And they're going to be released to a neighborhood someplace in Ohio. What makes you think, that they're not going to be your neighbors?
Reentry is sort of a new term, a new buzzword, but it's something that's been, people have been experiencing for hundreds of years. It's the process of exiting incarceration, whether it's the jails or the prisons, and returning to the community. And that entails lots of things, really every aspect of an individual's life, from reuniting with family to housing to employment to if individuals are in need of public benefits, there's a process to navigate there, and really it's absolutely everything.
So what does it mean that you're going to go back home and now have to look over your family or be the breadwinner of your family? That's intimidating and that's scary. And if those questions are not asked to an individual, more often than not, they're going to come home and they're going to be scared, they're going to be fearful of what they're encountering, and then they're going to result and do things that they were doing prior to incarceration because they're trying to make ends meet.
When everybody's gone, the PO's gone, the treatment center's gone, and it's just left to me to make the right decisions, that's when we get in trouble. So we try to hold these guys accountable even then, after they're off parole, after all probation, PRC. We still want to say, hey, 3, 4, 5 months later, what you guys doing? How's everything coming? Why don't you come in, let's talk.
There's so much that you're overwhelmed with when you first get out because you're dealing with the unknown. You know nothing. Only thing you know is your name. You don't know where you're going to get money. You don't know when you're actually going to get a job. Trying to go about that, navigate that. How do you explain that you've been in prison and why were you in prison? Trying to convince someone that, I am a good person. I'm not going to do that. This is what I've learned in prison.
Particularly for women, there is a different sort of challenge than with male offenders. There's a stigma that is put on women that men don't have to bear. There are oftentimes children involved. That makes it all the more complex that the women are able to get out and find viable employment so that they can provide for their children and families. So I think that is very different in terms of they really have to leave us and hit the ground running with a whole lot more responsibilities often than what men do.
And we all know trust is a huge issue with anyone. So trying to convince that employer or whoever that, you can take a chance on me and I do have these skills and I'm able to apply them.
we know that without employment, recidivism is so much more likely for someone, because for most people, prison and jail is not somewhere they want to be. They would much rather be able to support themselves and live in the community, and without being able to obtain employment, which is a very big barrier for most restored citizens, their recidivism is almost a definite, because if they can't support themselves, what else are they going to do? Our
top two missions of our agency currently are, we want to reduce violence and we want to reduce recidivism. We certainly can't call ourselves successful by any measure if people are coming back repeatedly in our front door. So we really want to put systems in place that we can measure and have some strong data that shows what we're doing is working and people are not coming back to our prisons. But if you don't have policy that assists you in removing barriers to help those folks, because certainly if you have people who leave here and they can't get just those basic needs such as a house and a job, and how are they going to sustain being out? I know it'd be difficult for me. It'd be difficult for me. So I think if we can really have legislation that really backs what we're trying to do, that is kind of our starting point.
I think the most important way to combat recidivism is to, and I think this is the most important part, is give the offender an opportunity. You know, I think a lot of us will put this population in a box because of a felony conviction, because of past behavior. And we all make mistakes, and we all deserve a second chance. So if we can get past the fact that this gentleman has a felony, and that's who he is, which is not who he is what he's done, you know, I think that is the first way to combat it.
We know that about 80% of criminal defendants in Ohio are low income. So these are folks that are coming from our poorest neighborhoods, from our worst school systems, from unfortunately, broken families a lot of the time. And particularly when it comes to the African American community, we're incarcerating about 1 in 3 black men at some point in their lives. The war on drugs has been incredibly hard on African American families and on low income families generally, because we see enforcement at a much higher rate in the poor urban neighborhoods than they are in the suburban, typically white neighborhoods. We know that white and African American people use drugs at about the same rate, but the enforcement is incredibly more focused on the African American community. So you have sort of all of these outside factors going into, again, criminal history and criminal behavior down the road.
The majority of the individuals who are housed in our state system, prison system, are low-level offenders. And I think they deserve a second chance. These are individuals who have, many of them, much talent. We're talking about human capital at the end of the day.
The money could certainly be better spent. When I look at our situations of our school systems, and you look around in other areas of the other community, and you think, wow, if all the money is put into our prison system and we are just warehousing people. And now understand, it's not about, not knowing that there are people who need to be incarcerated. There absolutely is. But the bigger picture, if you look at statistically, for example, in our prison, probably anywhere from 55 to 65% of the women are going to return home. They're nonviolent, low-level first-time offenders. They probably, looking at their assessments when they come into our intake, and looking at the pathways in which they came to us, we probably need to be putting these folks into treatment for recovery, because 1 out of 3 women have a dual diagnosis of a mental health issue as well as a substance abuse issue. So I just think that we are, or we have put too many of the wrong people in our facilities, and it comes with a very high cost.
And I think violent crime is something that is very misunderstood. We have a lot of terms in our criminal code, burglary, robbery, terms that indicate violence and terms that indicate there was, some violence involved in the commission of crimes, when the actual conduct that can get one convicted of those type of crimes doesn't necessarily involve violence. However, they're going to be deemed a violent offender because that's what's on that, that's what's on that piece of paper that says that this is the crime they committed. So there's just so many factors that sort of go into this, and that's not to say that people don't commit violent crimes, because of course they do. Of course we know violence happens, and there are lots of reasons for that, and I can't say that every violent criminal won't be a criminal again, that sort of thing, but the fact of the matter is we've decided that incarceration is the way that we punish people for crimes, and if we intend to let them out, then we need to provide them an opportunity to reintegrate into our communities. Otherwise, what's the point of letting them out? And we know we can't afford to not let them out. That's not an option.
As a warden at the Ohio Reformatory for Women, the process of rehabilitation is not singular. It's very multifaceted, it's very complex when you're talking about people and their needs and the resources in which we have to offer. And it's just not one magic thing that happens. It's people making an investment and deciding that they're going to do things differently, they're going to make different choices. They're going to put down those criminogenic thinking patterns and ways, and they're going to be pro-social. They're going to get involved. They're going to really invest in themselves.
And it also makes you appreciate your private time and what you do with that time as well too.
Being incarcerated kind of forced me to get into self, and I learned about myself more than anything.
It was the discovery of who I was, being able to tap into my inner self, and going deep within myself and getting to the core and the root of my issues, and being able to identify why I did the things that I did and why I was so angry. And the most important thing was taking responsibility.
And I just got a sense of direction.
The understanding that you cannot validate yourself by your job or by your circumstances or by where you live or by your education. You have to know who you are within yourself.
And once that happens, in my mind, particularly in an environment like ours, then that's where we come into play with the resources that runs congruent with that behavior and that thinking, and we can really affect change in people.
It's not cookie cutter, and I think fortunately our society over the past couple of years is really understanding that this population is not one type of person. It is a full variety of individuals. Previously, 10, 20 years ago, many programs were built upon curriculums that were a one-stop for everyone, no matter what your situation was, no matter how long you were incarcerated. Now, programs and as a whole, research is showing that you have to individualize treatment, you have to individualize programs pertaining to that particular person.
I believe that rehabilitation is possible for ex-offenders. It's a proven fact. There's so many ex-offenders who have gone on to become business entrepreneurs, judges, and well respected within their community.
The good thing about a man who has spent, we'll say 5, 6, 7 years in the institution is that he's used to a daily routine, and it becomes a routine.
You do have a lot of discipline. You don't get to lay around in bed all day as people think you do. You do have jobs. You have to be there on time. You have to do your job. There's huge consequences if you don't meet those. So yeah, there is a discipline that's there.
Because we're on a time schedule and we work certain hours a day, and I have expectations of what the ladies are to finish. They will develop the discipline to get up in the morning, come to work, know what's expected of you, and in that aspect, you take that with you. If you know that you learn how to manage your time so that you can meet expectations, you learn what expectations are.
So they do have a lot to bring to the table, and there's also a lot of training that goes on there too if you take advantage of it. For example, I was a dog trainer, so I got those skills. Horticulture was just something I was always interested in. I got those skills. I got a certificate in food preparation.
Those who choose a further education, those who choose to learn how to cut hair or what have you, have a spirit of discipline. They know how hard it is to work for someone else. So their goal is to learn a trade, so when they come home, they can actually become entrepreneurs.
In order to become an entrepreneur, it does take tenacity and a willingness to really stand on your own and be self-reliant. And I think individuals coming through the criminal justice system and who are recently released from prison have had the opportunity to, one, learn about patience, and inside I believe they work with a lot of the legal ramifications of their cases, so hence they're doing a lot of reading, and I think that the time that they've spent away has allowed them to be patient, and that's what it really would take to become an entrepreneur.
History has taught us that our country has been built on small businesses. People have immigrated to this country and started small businesses in their local communities because they didn't have those resources to be able to get certain things. Now you're becoming a part of society again. Why not help build our communities back up by giving opportunities to individuals that are starting their own businesses that may have been ex-felons or ex-convicts or re-entering into society?
Entrepreneurship, particularly in this economy, and for people who have a focus and a drive, this is absolutely a prime time, as I see it. You can pretty much draw your own landscape. But I think for the women that are here at this facility, they really need some guidance and some tutoring in that respect. But we have some really brilliant women that are inside of this facility, and there is sky's probably the limit in terms of what they can do. So I would say for the women who really are creative and they're driven and very focused and have some sort of plan in mind, perfect time to stretch themselves and go into their own business.
If you're in trouble for distributions and sales of drugs, it's like buying, selling, and making a profit. So if you got the ability and know-how to buy, sell, and make a profit, you can apply that same ability to buying, selling, and making a profit with sugar, cupcakes, donuts, clothing, cars, tires, anything that has to do with buying, selling, and making a profit. You can apply that same ability and be legit.
Being an entrepreneur is the next best step into gaining gainful employment. There's always services that is going to be needed, and there's no better time than to work for your own self, especially if you like to complete projects on your own, you like to work on your own, you want to be your own boss.
that is what being an entrepreneur is all about. And right now, because the jobs are very limited, and in one article I read recently that some employers don't look for unemployed people when they're searching for employees. So you might as well start your own business so that you can be successful.
Employers have so many potential candidates coming before them that when they compare someone who does not have a prior conviction with someone that does, as much as you want to believe that they're looking at the qualities and their skills and making an assessment, unfortunately that's not happening for all employers. Some employers, yes, some employers are embracing our clients and the population. But when you think about entrepreneurship, you bypass that process, and it allows an individual to take an idea, take a concept that they may have been thinking about for a long time, for a short period of time. They may have already done the research, started planning what they need to do, and actually execute.
The first thing people need to understand when they're starting a business is that it's not easy. They are going to have to spend a lot of time and a lot of hours in prepping for their business before the business comes to fruition.
I don't think it necessarily takes a rocket science to come up with an idea. You know, anyone can come up with an idea, and then you just gotta believe in your idea and put forth the work effort to implement it. And you know, that's the greatest force that you can put behind it. It's work, you know, and a lot of people aren't willing to work. They think it's just gonna fall out of the sky into your lap and say, here I am, and you're a self-made millionaire. But it don't work like that.
I've always been resilient, but this is gonna take a little bit more. So having that motivation and realizing like, okay, this is it, because what else are you gonna do? You can't do anything else, you know, so you're gonna have to figure out something. And I remember actually just sitting down, there's a walk dog near here, and just sitting there and thinking like, okay, Wendy, so what can you do? You know, this is, you know, you want to start a business, so you do have this opportunity, you know, do you continue with that? And I just remember, you know, sitting there thinking, it's like, well, if they're not going to give me a job, then I'm going to have to create one, legally, of course, you know, on my own. So there was that motivation at some point, because you realize, you know, there's no point of return.
To actually get individuals entered into society is to give them the tools that they need to become self-sufficient and to become a contributing member of society, to pay their taxes, to take care of their families, to take care of their children.
As a society, we should all care. And this is just not me speaking as the warden at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. This is Janine Trim speaking as a citizen, as a person who lives in the community. We should care because we're paying a high cost. And I think the cost that we're paying, we're getting no return on our investment as a society.
They've served their time. And we as a society have a responsibility to allow these individuals to be able to be productive members of our society.
I understand people's fear and, you know, and wanting to deal with this problem. However, what we've done, disenfranchising people, preventing people from getting employment, preventing people from getting housing, it's not working.